So Mike Thompson, Sonoma County Water Agency, and has the Copeland Creek Restoration Project. And he's going to tell you that story, and then I've got a few questions for all the panelists and you guys out here.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Mike Thompson, and a little background on myself, which I think is important right now, is I used to coach kids soccer, and when they were mainly my boys were 8 to 12, and they said you get 10 seconds for every year of age with these kids, and that was their attention span. I'm thinking at 4:05 on the end of the thing, I think I'm working with about the same group here. So at lunch, Jen was nice enough to let me go through my PowerPoint slide and really do a mercy killing on it, and where I cut out half the slides at random. So we'll all be seeing my presentation here for the first time. So we'll just kind of see how this goes. So we'll get through this pretty quick. We'll try to keep you awake here, and if you can tell me how I operate this talk. Okay, so like I said, going to be quick. So again, my soccer team out here. One of the other things you learned is that you always have to stand with you facing the sun so you guys can see me. So we don't have sun here, but anyways, the one thing I just want you to remember, the one point that you take home is that, and I think you've heard it all, is that watershed investments are still a really good investment. And one of the things I want to go through is just kind of using Copeland Creek and that area as an example of the type of investments that we've seen through time. And we're kind of, to me, on our third stage of watershed investments over time. And for the first part, I'll just kind of go back to we saw some of the other slides about kind of early settlement and what things look like. And I always kind of picture, I'm a fifth generation from Sonoma County. Family's been there for long time. So anyways, but I imagine what these early settlers came. They come through the God-forsaken Central Valley. They come through what will eventually be the second best wine growing region in the U.S., Napa Valley, second best. And so they come over to the hills, and all of a sudden they see this, and they're going, oh my God, this is Eden. You got grass, you got this beautiful grass. And it's like, why does stuff grow here? And I forgot which button to push again. And page, got it. Let's see. Yeah, no, there we go. And so, and the thing you find is that there's water every year. I mean, there's just water, amazing. Most places you go to, it's dry, and there's just water, on all these plains, vernal pools everywhere, just amazing thing. And, and if these early settlers had satellite-based infrared cameras, they would realize, where does this water come from? It comes from atmospheric rivers. Everyone know the term now? Everyone kind of all hip on atmospheric rivers, but and so, we get these immense storms, like that, as you all know through here, and we heard from the Salt River. We get a lot of these, and produces, like I said, right here you get about 40 inches of rain. In our plain in Santa Rosa Valley, we get about 30 inches of rain, pretty close. But one of the, and also if they had upward-facing Doppler radar, they would realize that one of the things like the hills you have right around here, you may get 34 inches down here. Up in the hills, you get twice that amount. Just as the air goes up, these hills you have here, and we have them in Sonoma County, they just produce massive amounts of rain, massive amounts of water, and they bring with it both water and a lot of sediment. But, to these early settlers, you're looking at this area, you have water. So probably one of the first big investments that were made would be for agriculture. So I'd raise a hand, is, drainage for agriculture a good idea? I think we saw it so probably, yeah, I think Jake says so. So Jake, if you say so, then it is so. So this is what happened early on. This area in here was developed for agriculture. This is the Roanoke Park area. Through there you can see Copeland Creek there. Prior to this, actually a lot of these streams never went anywhere. They just came down, formed these big 1,000-acre lakes in the Santa Rosa Plain, and didn't really go anywhere until actually the Western settlement, really with agriculture development, channelized them so that they would drain and so that they could farm those. So. And it pretty much stayed like this, for quite a while. And, and the folks, apparently they didn't mind having the flooded homes. They were used to it, and that's all good, and they're happy when people come by. But so, post World War II, you get folks wanting to have the American dream, and they all want their young America home, and they don't want it to flood. And so you have kind of the second big watershed investment, which was, taking all of these, these creeks that, during agricultural times, they would still flood. This actually wasn't a bad thing. You get the sediment recharge, nice fresh sediment on the farms. It's a good thing. You don't want that in your Young America home. And I grew up in a Young America home, and that is a Young America home from the A section, Jake. So there we go. So in response to that, kind of the second big watershed investment that was made was taking all these creeks and making them these big, nice flood control channels, nice trapezoidal channels. You get the water out, and then you maintain them so that they just do nothing that flow. And really, you maintain them so no living thing can survive in them, because they're really just for drainage. And so, by like I said, the second big period of watershed investment then, did this, but it created this, this opportunity for development, and it really increased land values and the urbanization of large areas of Sonoma County, which I live in, so I'm okay with that. So as a result of these first kind of 2 episodes of watershed investment, there's still some lingering issues, some legacy issues. One is that, yeah, we haven't eliminated flooding. Most projects are designed in urban areas for a protection against a 100-year flood. So if there's a 120-year event, it floods. And this is kind of what happened here. So we still have, those are still some of the issues we have. The other thing we have is all of that sediment I mentioned previously, and the same thing we heard in the Salt River talk, that sediment is still coming down from the hills, and it used to settle out on the plains. Now instead it settles out in our flood control channels. And there may be more expensive ways to manage sediment than what we're doing now, but I don't think there are. So when these were conceived, and this is, I don't fault anyone, back in the 50s and 60s where this happened nationwide, there's a problem to solve. It was flooding, and so this is how you solve flooding. And in the flood control community, we've come to realize that it really didn't work that well. I mean, in some ways it did, in other ways it didn't. But just to give you an idea, like for us, we have about 70 miles of constructed flood control channels. In the mid-90s, it was probably costing us around $800,000, maybe $1 million a year to maintain those. It's costing us upwards of $7 and $8 million now. And that's actually not sustainable. We're actually at a point, especially in some of our bigger zones, where I'm actually drawing, I'm in deficit spending right now, and I have to find ways to bring that down. But in the old days, you just go out and you dig out a channel. Now, upstream, downstream cofferdams, fish rescue, fish surveys, flaggers both sides, water quality sampling upstream and downstream. It's become very expensive to manage sediment in an aquatic environment. And so that's something I think that really has to change, and it's something that we're looking at. The other thing is, again, these streams were managed in such a ways, their main purpose was just to be large drainage ditches and just to get the water out of a community as quickly as possible. And there are some downsides to that because, ideally you want this water sitting on the plain recharging your groundwater. You don't necessarily want this sediment moving downstreams and affecting other areas. And then also, these streams which used to have nice complexity for fisheries, that was gone. So those were kind of some of the things. So, as we get into there we go, what I call kind of like our third leg of watershed investment, it's really what we've been talking about, more in the rural sense, and for us in the urban sense, we're really looking at, and the Copeland Creek project is a good example of that. It's still a good investment, and one of the things I think we've seen, and let's see what slide is next. Yeah, okay. So, I randomly did this well. So, one of the things, the first 2 episodes of watershed investments were pretty simple from a funding standpoint. It was either farmers getting together, and I think, Mark, you had mentioned earlier, if someone can do something on their own and not have to really involve others, you're going to do that. And so during the first couple episodes, the first one, with farmers doing this, they themselves or another farmer, they could get together, get a bulldozer and do that. Very simple. The second one, you had mainly developers, for the most part, as developers or cities funding it. A couple folks doing, a couple entities, it was a little more complicated. Where we're at now, it's extreme. I think one of the things we've seen that really struck me, it's incredibly complicated to do a project. For us on the Copeland Creek project, You know, eventually will be a $13 million project. Right now we've got $1 million Prop 1E funding just to get it started, but it's going to take many different sources of funding to be able to get this through. So we're looking at pretty much everyone you see there being able to providing funding for this. But there are benefits to it. One is we see, like, one of the economic benefits of this project, we see $15 million in water supply and flood risk reduction. Water supply is about $1 million, and that's just from, I could figure that out. On the flood risk, it's a pretty complicated thing, and I'm not going to bore you with it because I really don't understand it, but that's what they said. It's a $14 million. The other is, we see the other benefit is on our maintenance costs. And having this project, one of the components of it is going to be an upstream detention basins. And I'd show you pictures of all of it, but unlike the other ones where you've all done these really nice projects, we haven't started. So I'm just going to tell you what it will. So you just have to imagine it. So we're going to have these nice upstream detention basins that are going to capture water, settle out the sediment, fish will be happy, everyone will be happy. So, and in doing so, we won't have to go into the middle of the creeks and try to manage this sediment. And then the other main component is the habitat and the recreation, which I think is priceless, but I think that we can find some other values for it. And this, actually, this is one of the examples. Jake had mentioned earlier about how we're managing different. This is on the upper left, that is Copeland Creek, a flood control channel. That earlier picture I showed, kind of this empty creek, that's from that exact same stretch. So we're managing differently, trying to manage it for habitat and recreation. And so as I come to the end, I promised I would be short. Again, what was one of the key points I made? Come on, anyone? 10 seconds, good. So what's that? 10 seconds. Watershed investments are good investments, and they are. And second one is that they're just a lot more complicated, you know, and it takes, I mean, it really takes, I mean, I admire the people I've heard because you really have to have a strong champion. I actually have to say, credit Jake McKenzie with a lot of the work getting this, but you need that champion to get it through. And, but I think moving forward, if there are ways to get more secure sources of funding, you know, from urban residents, from whatever, to be able to have reliable funding every year, you're going to see more projects done. Because I said, if you honestly, if you have to work with 30 folks and do like a cake sale to generate a project, it's going to be always difficult. So really, it's important to have a secure source of funding. And it should be the end of my slides. And it is. And so anyways, what our project will do eventually is, again, it's going to provide groundwater recharge, flood protection, habitat. I'm going to try it without looking. Steelhead refugium, stormwater detention, recreation. Okay, I was close. So anyways, and I think I'm done within my 10 minutes. So.